First of all, can you say who you are, please?
So I'm Alan Cooklin. I'm a psychiatrist, just retired from the NHS, and I run the Kids Time Foundation. I'm the chief executive at the moment, and that is a charity developing a number of interventions for children of parents with mental illness, what they're called in Australia, COPME. And I say that because there's a big confusion in the United Kingdom between COPME and young carers. Most specifically because of the numbers. We know, for example, that the official statistics is still 165,000 young carers across the board, even though the BBC survey, which many people challenge, said it was 700,000. We know that Joe Aldridge is about, or hopefully being allowed to publish by the Department for Education, an update on that, but we believe it's not going to be that different from the original study, which means that there's a vast number of children. In fact, we know that there are 2 million children of parents with mental illness, of which 70% will suffer high levels of anxiety, social isolation, depression, and bullying, and so and stigma. So there's a big gap which nobody's really prepared to discuss. And in the United Kingdom, we have no name for these children, even though actually, if you looked at them, a significant proportion of that 1.4 million, that is 70% of the 2 million, might be considered as actually young carers because they're often caring emotionally for their parents and sometimes the medication as well. But we have no term. In the Nordic countries, that's all 5 of them, they're called young relatives. In Australia, they're called COPME because there they have services and research. In this country, we have no term, and this is really part of the confusion. And that's why I think there's a big neglected group. So the Kids Time Foundation's real goal is to address this group, even though we know it overlaps with young carers. And we've provided 2 main interventions. The Kids Time workshops, these are monthly, multiple family workshops, up to 20 families, which started in Camden and Islington. We now have about 15 and growing around the United Kingdom, both in the Wirral, in the West Country, and so on and so forth. And we have 5 in the rest of Europe, in Spain and in Germany and Portugal. Now, the Kids Time workshops, they meet monthly. They meet for about 2.5 hours. They use a mixture of joint groups with the parents and separate groups, drama and pizza, and filming always of the drama, and then discussing the children's drama with the parents. And the goal is not to treat anybody, but the goal is to promote a discussion that they've not been able to have about the parent's illness.
So how much of it is in a sense, the world of isolation that the young carers talk to us about? How much is it due to that they say still now, even after the Children's Act and the Families Act and the Care Act, that it's still the same as it was before, or they feel it's still the same?
It's multiple levels of isolation. It is isolation. But it's also isolation inside the family because it can't be discussed what's happening. In physical care, you can at least discuss with your parent the nature of their illness. Often in mental illness, you can't. And there may even be denial of what the child's role is, or even hostility towards the child. You know, you drove me mad, parents often say, don't they? Mm. So it is that. And there are, I suppose, 4 other adversities that these children face over and above the caring one. They face the actual impact of the illness, which I'm talking about in my workshop today. The fact that the parents' perceptions might invade the child to the point where the child feels they've got to believe that the parent is covered in bugs that they can't see. There's that. There's the stigma, which is a different stigma, just caring, but the stigma of mental illness on top of it. And it's also the stigma for the young person feeling that they are from a bad family, so there must be something wrong with them. There's also the effects of the treatment, which nobody usually talks to these kids about. So often the effects of the treatment can be very negative, like the parents sleeping or gaining weight or having strange movements or even ocular gyrate crises. And nobody's warned the child about this. So overall, there are a lot of other adversities that these children face, which don't get included in the discussion.
I mean, how much do professionals across the board, from police to social workers to local authority officials to schools, really understand the sort of things you're saying?
Well, in general, the answer is not. Although when we did a half-day training in Plymouth, organised by Stoke Downwell Community College, we thought there'd be about 60 people, and they got 190 from throughout Plymouth, including police, social workers, and so on and so forth. So they were obviously interested, but, I mean, my son-in-law, when I first talked to him about this, and he's now our accountant for the charity, he said, goodness me, I never thought about that. And the issue of the effects of parental mental illness on children is something most people have just not thought about.
Could that lead, do you think, to, in overall terms, any policy missing the point?
I think the current carers policy, whereas I think it's very good, I think it's missing a big point. And I've met Alistair Burt and tried to raise this with him, and he's invited me to send a paper, which I've sent. But I think it has got to eventually get discussed in the public domain. I have talked to Jeremy Corbyn about it and Luciana Berger, who are the, as you know, the Shadow Minister of Mental Health, and she recognises that this is an issue that's never got into the public domain. Okay. So that's our greatest hope.
Thank you very much, Alan. Okay. That's really interesting.